souls of
Hello and welcome to the Reviews Brothers, where we are more than halfway through the A to Z of PS2 Hidden Gems. This time round we're on the letter N, which was trickier than I thought, and involved wading through way too many NBA, NHL, NWA, NWO, NGL games. But I got there in the end, so how about I shut up, you press that subscribe button, and we take a look at some games. First up is Nanobreaker from Konami. This is a third-person action-adventure set in the distant future of 2021, where nanotechnology is being pushed really hard, so much so that the US dedicates an entire island to its research. As always, the experiments take a turn for the worst, and nanotech becomes dangerous and wipes out loads of people. Fast forward a few years and you play as Jake the Genocide Hero, and yep, that's actually what they call him in the game. He's a super tough chap who uses nanotech for good and is on a mission to eliminate all the evil nanotech stuff that is in the world, so humanity can sort its shit out. It's all very serious. So as Jake, you explore the island where all the shiz went down, fighting the evil Org Mechs, which are basically people and wildlife from around the island that nanotechnology has fused itself with, creating some abominations that need a killing. Actually, I kinda like that premise. The game is very linear, so gameplay is a simple case of running into an area where the obligatory force field will appear and stay there until you've killed all the enemies in the area, and this is your main focus, killing stuff. There's a good enough variety, and they can actually be pretty hard to fight when you get used to the controls and combos, which are good, but definitely not as smooth as you'd like. You have a cool plasma sword thing, which is your main weapon, but using the nanotech you can unlock various forms for it, like a scythe or an axe, which are more powerful and allow different combos. You've got a weak and strong attack button as well as a grapple button, which is very handy as it's basically Scorpion's get over here move and lets you whip enemies that are far away and bring them to you, so you don't have to wade through large groups of enemies. You can also block and dodge, but it's one of those games where you've got to finish your animations before doing anything else, so I found that I didn't bother blocking all that often, which is probably why I kinda suck at this game. Enemies you kill bleed, and they bleed a lot, and this is kind of like your points, and for every 2,000 gallons of blood that you spill, you get a power-up, which might be extra health or energy for your special attacks or something like that. Enemies also drop crystals, which can also be found in hidden places in the levels. These can be used in the pause menu to upgrade your combo chains, and you need certain coloured or powered crystals to unlock certain branches, which is pretty cool. But remembering a lot of them is quite tough, as you need combinations of the face buttons, and at times you need to hold L or R at the same time. It can get kind of confusing, but they will do massive damage when you pull them off. Sometimes you'll even sprout wings. These let you glide, as well as do a few different combos. There's a surprising amount of combos here, and you will want to learn most of them and not just the basic 3-hit combo, as enemies can take a fair few hits. Graphically, the game looks good. It's typical PS2 Konami. The animation is smooth and the characters look like a combination of Castlevania and Metal Gear Solid to me. The environments can be a bit boring though, and this is the era of grey and browns, and there's a hell of a lot of that here. In fact, that's probably my main complaint, is that the levels are just a little bit boring. There's also a fair bit of platforming in here, and I have to say I didn't really like these parts all that much, mainly because the jumping is kind of strange here, and you go up more than you do forward, making it hard to judge distances, and I often fell off something that isn't instant death, and the checkpoints here are few and far between. But still, this was a fun game with lots of blood, and a pretty in-depth combo system, and some really fun boss fights, and I would recommend playing it. Nicktoons Battle for Volcano Island is one of a few Nicktoons games that see characters from your favourite Nickelodeon cartoons team up for an adventure. Some funky crabs from an island world called Volcano Island have summoned the Nicktoons to help them fight a new menace called the Morgue, who have appeared and are causing all sorts of problems. Being the good guys and gals that you are, you do everything you can to help, but first you'll need to find your friends as the summoning spell went wrong, so everyone ended up at different parts of the island. You start the game as SpongeBob and Danny Phantom, and the game is always more fun with a friend. As you play, you'll find Patrick, whoever the girl from Danny Phantom is, as well as the Fairly Odd Parents characters. They are all playable and have their own movesets and special attacks, but they're pretty much the same really, so you can just choose your favourite character. You never need a specific character for a specific part of the level, which is a bit of a shame. There's also a few other characters too, but these are just for the cutscenes and story, and you never get to play as them, like Jimmy Neutron. It's a 3D platform game that plays like a watered down version of those Lego games. You'll need to explore the environment and fight a ton of enemies until you reach the end of the levels. There's also a load of stuff for you to collect. There's items that represent each of the characters all over the place, like shells or cogs or feathers, and collecting these unlocks new costumes for the characters, which is cool. As well as this, each level has a number of larger hidden items that have been teleported from your character's worlds. Collecting these unlocks bonus levels that are specific to a character, which is pretty cool, and you'll need to do a bit more exploring to find these. Thankfully, you can also go back to older levels whenever you want to find any that you might have missed before. As mentioned, there's loads of enemies all over the levels. Each character has a few attacks. You can hammer the circle button for a never-ending combo that sorts out most of the smaller enemies. And you've also got a jump attack, which is a ground pound, as well as a projectile attack, though this does use ammo, so you can't just spam it. Most enemies drop either health or projectile power-ups though, so you're never waiting too long to get some more. There's also boss battles here, as well as enemies that have certain weak spots, like needing to hit them from behind, just like your mother. Yeah, sorry, I've been watching G-Man videos. There's also usually enemy spawns around the levels as well, which you'll want to destroy if you want to stop enemies from constantly appearing. There's basic puzzle and platform elements as well, but rarely anything more than finding an item or throwing an object into another one, but that's fine as it keeps the gameplay going and it's clearly aimed at a younger audience. In terms of graphics, I actually really like how it looks. It's bright and colourful and the characters all look fine. They're all voiced by their actual voice actors as well, I believe anyway, which is always good. Overall, this is just a simple, mindless game that I actually enjoyed playing. It's a good one to chill out with, especially with a mate, if you're looking for something that's fun, responsive, and you don't have to worry about overly complex mechanics and serious plots. Fighting game time now with Geo Battle Coliseum. This is a great fighting game from SNK featuring 40 characters from across a wide range of Neo Geo games, including the likes of Fatal Fury, King of Fighters, or are they the same thing? I can never tell. Samurai Showdown, and even non-fighting games like Metal Slug and Athena, which is cool. There is a plot, but it's a fighting game, so it's largely irrelevant, and it's the fighting that matters. And being an SNK fighting game, it's done very well. You've got a few modes here, your standard arcade mode where you choose 2 characters and then you battle your way through all the opponents until you get to the boss. But what's kind of strange here, and might be something that I'm totally missing, is that you only use the characters that you choose for the first fight. After that, you just switch to a random pair of fighters for each of the subsequent battles. This was kind of strange at first, but I actually like it, as I always want to try out new characters anyway, and this made recording footage of different characters way easier. Something else that's different is that you've got a 300-second timer. When that runs out, the final boss will appear. So you basically have to win as many fights as you can in 300 seconds. It's all very strange, but I guess it started as an arcade game and that's probably got something to do with it. If you lose a fight though, it's back to the start for you. And you have to beat both your opponent characters, whereas they only have to beat one of yours. So make sure to switch characters regularly to keep their health as topped up as possible, as it will recharge when they're not fighting. Also, between some fights you get to choose a little battle bonus for the next one, like a bit more time or replenish some of your health and things like that, which is pretty cool. There's also other modes like a tag battle, which is more traditional, another arcade mode and a survival mode, and of course a 2-player option, which is always fun. The actual fighting is solid and responsive. You've got your usual set of Street Fighter style button inputs and combinations, and it's very smooth and responsive. Characters often play wildly different from one another, staying true to their own game styles, which can make learning some of them pretty tricky. Thankfully there is a move list in the pause menu, so you'll want to use that. Until you get to the final boss that is, at which point you might as well just give up, because it's one of the hardest boss fights I've ever played. I could barely touch him as he spams attacks at a ridiculous rate. Yeah, I know I need to get good, but SNK does have a bit of a reputation for taking the piss with their bosses, and this is definitely no exception. Thankfully the fights are fair and the graphics and animation here are excellent, which really kept me wanting to play. So yeah, if you like fighting games, this is one to check out.
The game is Neo Contra on the PS2. It is a lot of fun and you should play it too. That's right, Beltbuckle Bill is back by popular demand after getting knocked out of the semi-finals of Eurovision, and I'm here to talk to you about a video game. Neo Contra is the 10th in the Contra lineage, released in 2004 on the PS2 by Konami. You are Bill Reiser, a badass marine dressed in blue armour with short spiky blonde hair, or maybe you play as Jaguar, a different badass marine dressed in red armour, with long black hair and a bionic eye. If you are Jaguar, get used to having no storyline. As Bill Riser, you fight your way through 7 missions against human, robot and alien scum to save the Earth from the Elite Four Contra, and a 5th one you find out about a little bit later. Spoiler alert, the 5th one is you, or you are him. It's a clone thing. The Elite Four consist of a fat general guy, sexy lady, who Bill knew before this game, plant-human hybrid dude, and a talking dog. I'm not joking. There is a plot, but it's mainly baddies trying to be bad and goodies trying to be good. The voice acting is terribly wonderful. Think Resident Evil 1 and you're there. Initially, I was perplexed by the offering of only 4 missions, especially as they aren't super long, with mission 1 taking about 6 minutes once you've tried it a few times. However, when I realised you have to complete them all in one go to unlock a 5th, my appetite was whet. And then, if your ranking isn't high enough, it's game over at the end of mission 5, so you need to put on your big boy pants, up your game, kill more, and die less in order to complete everything. It's an isometric shooter in the main, switching to side and top down in between sections of levels, which mixes things up nicely. The majority of enemies exist on the same level as you, so primary and secondary weapons take care of them. However, you do encounter some flying, hovering and higher level enemies. You can't jump, but you have tertiary attacks to destroy those suckers. Press X to dodge on the spot, or X in a direction to quickly phase out of the way. Handy in a tight spot. You start with 3 weapon set types, A, B and C. With each type you have a primary attack, machine gun, spread shot and charged shot, a secondary attack, grenade, fire whip and flame balls, and a tertiary attack, missiles, lightning, and another one I've forgotten, I'm too lazy to look it up, sorry. As you progress in the game, you can unlock other 3 types. Annoyingly, you can't actually change in between once you've selected one, so choose wisely. Spread shot seems to be the natural choice. It was always pretty destructive in the early Contra games. But the fire rate is quite slow, so you might prefer the machine gun with rapid fire. Lightning is weaker than missiles, but once locked on you can attack 8 times in one go with lightning, whereas missiles only 4 times, so it's worth experimenting. Enemies range from melee, soldiers, bots and bugs to those that fire projectiles, and plenty of bosses to go around. It's one hit kill, so you need your wits about you, but it never feels like bullet hell. Some of the bosses are disgusting creations, and I love them. The first mini-boss is a Venus flytrap crossed with a zombie baby that sends out bees to attack you and also spits out gas and liquid. It looks great. As you can probably tell, I really enjoyed this game. It is hard but not impossible, and when you die, it's your fault. The enemies, including bosses, all have simple AI and patterns, so as long as you learn them and stay disciplined, you'll do alright. Shooting can be a ball ache, as you only shoot in one direction, and that is the one you are facing. You have to constantly dodge in different directions to avoid enemies and projectiles, so it can become a bit frustrating. You can, however, hold down L2, which locks the direction you are facing, so you can strafe, but keep firing forwards, or backwards, or wherever you locked it to. You can also hold R2, which keeps you still, but this is only good until you have to dodge out of the way, so I used it sparingly. My only main frustration with the game is 1 pixel death. I've never liked that mechanic in a game, feeling that only significant impact should kill you, and only accepting you should die from minimal contact if you have a run-in with a poisonous enemy. But that frustration isn't enough to stop the overall enjoyment of the game. I played a little on my own, but it really opens up when you have a wingman. I'm lucky enough to have an 11-year-old son who loves video games, and we had a brilliant time playing this together. We haven't managed to get to the 6th mission yet, but it's one we will return to until we do, whilst getting better each time we play through. This is a must play. Don't delay. Buy or download today. Thanks for listening. On to the next one. Game over, man! Game over!
Thanks, Beltbuckle Bill. Nice to have you back. If crossovers are your thing, then you might want to investigate Namco X Capcon, which apparently is how you pronounce it. A really cool RPG that mashes all your favourite Namco and Capcom characters and villains, which I guess are characters still. The story goes that someone has been opening portals between the 2 gaming developers' dimensions, sucking various characters into one another's worlds. Conveniently, there are the same amount of good guys as there are bad ones. The good guys all decide to team up and take down the bad guys and to find out what the hell is going on. Of course it gets a lot more complex than that, but that's the basics. This game was actually only released in Japan, so I'm playing a fan translated version here, which you can easily find on the World Wide Web. The translation is definitely not perfect, but it's more than enough for you to know what the hell's going on. And there is a lot of text here. Thankfully, you can skip most of it. Gameplay wise, I believe it's what you kids would call a strategy RPG, but I think it plays a little differently to some of them, though don't quote me on that, as I rarely play games like this. It's divided up into levels, which is a little bit odd, but works for simpletons like me. You get a bit of story, and then you see what characters you're going to play as. Each character can have different stats in terms of movement, attacks, specials and so on, and you'll need to move your character around the environment so they're in range of enemies and then battle them. Some characters are melee only, so have to be up close. Some are ranged only, so have to be further away from bad guys, and others are a mixture of both. You'll take it in turns to move your characters, and you can do a few actions per turn. Once you go into attack mode, the game gives you a cool side view of your characters, and you've got a load of moves that you can pull off. On your turn, you press the circle button to attack. Holding a direction while pressing it does a different attack, and you'll soon learn that there's different combos that do more damage and so on. It's great fun figuring it all out. You'll build up a special bar as you fight as well, and when that's full you can press the triangle button during a fight to do a massive special move. And on top of that, certain characters have mixed combos, where they'll both attack at the same time for a really cool cutscene. On the enemy's turn, you'll need to defend, and you get a few options here. You can either just act tough and take the hit, or you can do a normal block, which uses some of your ability points but reduces the damage you take. Or you can do a super block thingy, which uses more points but means you'll take a lot less damage, and some characters even have a counter move that you can do. These of course use loads of points, but you'll reverse an enemy attack doing damage of your own. As you play each level, more and more characters will teleport in, and it's really cool seeing all your favourite heroes from Street Fighter, Tekken, Ghouls and Ghosts, Klonoa, Resident Evil, Dino Crisis, and a bunch of JRPGs that I've never heard of, all come together for a fight. The levels are all themed around various characters, as you'd expect, and I really like how it all looks, with a more cartoony design for the characters. Some people might complain that it doesn't look detailed enough, but I dig the style personally. I did find it a bit of a shame that you only ever have predetermined characters for each of the levels, as I was hoping to be able to choose from my favourites, but that doesn't seem to be the case, and I think I'm probably about halfway through the game, believe it or not. Instead, it's all dictated by the story. But the story is interesting, if a little convoluted, but that might be the translation. And there's a lot more mechanics to the game that I'm not explaining, or even particularly sure of how they actually work. But even with my limited knowledge of it all, I'm still having a blast with this one, mainly for the fan service, and I would recommend checking this out if you can, and I am actually going to carry on playing it all the way through to the end. Here is Neopets, the Darkest Faerie, an action-adventure game based on the Neopets things that I honestly have no idea about, so don't bother asking. I'm assuming they're sort of a Pokemon rip-off thing situation, but not quite. Anyway, the story here is that you are Tor, a wolf bloke thingy who conveniently wants to be a knight. You start off doing some jobs around your town, helping out your family, which are nicely disguised tutorials. Soon enough though, you have your sword and are off to deliver a package to a nearby town. You're attacked by bandits and fight them off, and then are given more jobs from the other townsfolk, until you find out that an evil fairy was sealed in an underground cavern by a good fairy and is now on the loose, so you end up on a quest to take the bitch down. So the game sees you going from towns and other environments where you'll be given quests by a bunch of the many characters in the game. These range from usual fetch quests, killing everything quests, and so on. Doing these quests, I've said quest a lot there, earns you items and money. Money can be used to buy new armour, weapons and shields, as well as things like health items and so on. You'll also find elemental wispy things in various places. These can be used and equipped to your weapons and armour to give them new properties, like having a sword, or just making your attacks stronger. You'll also need certain wisps in order to open certain chests that you'll find in the game. Not all of them need one, but the ones with the best loot definitely will. You'll find enemies all over the place here, and I've got to say that the combat isn't the best here, but it is manageable. You've got a basic combo that you can do, but attacking enemies without taking damage yourself is a lot harder than it should be, and I did find that I would need to cheese it and do the old hit and run method a lot of the time. Now there are more weapons in the game, so it's likely that it will get easier as you play, but I'm only a couple of hours in and would always be nervous when fighting groups of enemies. There's also a fair bit of platforming to do here, and actually getting around the environment is easy and fun to do. Tor controls surprisingly well and doesn't have any overly complicated moves or combos that you need to worry about. Keeping track of your progress is easy with your handy quest logbook, and you have a proper map. And I'll be honest, I was surprised at how well it was all presented. It's another game that you can tell was made for kids, but it does have an appeal to people that like these type of games, like me. It's by no means a great game though, and it does feel a bit of a budget title and a bit rough around the edges, especially in the combat. But the story's good, the graphics are actually surprisingly good with some really good animation and loads of different character models. Obviously they must be based on the actual Neopets characters, whoever the hell they are. And the variety in quests that you'll be doing is actually quite impressive, and it made me want to keep playing. So yeah, give it a go if you can handle it. Here's Nightshade from Sega, a spin-off from the Shinobi series if my memory is correct. Here you play as Copa Hibana, a funky ninja woman who actually works for the government, and if governments had more ninjas and less money-grabbing lying thieves, maybe we'd like them a bit more. Anyway, Hibana is on a one-woman mission to recover a legendary cursed sword that's popped up and is unleashing a bunch of army hellspawn people. Don't you hate it when that happens? The game is set in futuristic Japan and sees you going from such exciting environments as inside an office building to outside an office building to some sewers and even some streets. So yeah, while the levels aren't exactly brimming with creativity and are mostly just greys and browns, they are still fun to play. It's a very linear game and actually plays almost identically to Nanobreaker, which we looked at about 10 minutes ago. You run from point A to point B, at which point barriers will appear and you'll have to kill everything you see to get rid of the barriers and progress. Eventually you'll find a boss, kill it, and then it's on to the next level. But it's all done pretty well and is good fun to play. Combat is the main focus and you've got some pretty cool stuff you can do. You have a standard combo and it's a hack and slash formula that we all know and love. Enemies will spawn in out of nowhere for you to deal with, but the fun part is the lock-on mechanics that you have. You can lock on to the nearest enemy and then you can jump or dash, and preferably a combination of the two. If you get to the enemy with your jump and dash and kill it, you automatically lock onto the next enemy where you again have one jump and one dash in order to reach it and kill them. This goes on as long as you can possibly do it while you're still killing enemies. And what's cool is that when you do kill them all, they'll stay still until your combo is done, and then you get a cool cutscene that shows them all dying at the same time, just like you get in anime. This is super satisfying, and when you manage to get a kill of 7 or 8 enemies, it just looks awesome. You also have ninja dart things that you can throw. These are good for stunning or killing weaker enemies and help you keep your combos when they're used properly. It's really fun to learn and play around with. There's also a lot of platforming in this game. You can wall jump and wall run, being able to stick to pretty much any surface you can land your sexy legs on. You'll need to do combos of wall running and lock-on attacks to reach some of the higher areas, often ones that contain secret things for you to collect, and while I'm still not very good at it, it's always fun to try and do. Then there's the bosses, which are all massive and good fun. They have patterns and weak spots that you'll need to go figure out, much like any good old boss. The game looks decent, the environments aren't very exciting, but they look good enough, and the characters and enemies all look great with some cool animations here and there. It's not a particularly complex game, but it is a solid one, and it's a lot of fun flipping all over the place killing hellspawn, and you might just enjoy it. If you prefer your ninjas to shoot stuff in the face, then you'll like Ninja Assault. This one here is a light gun game, and back in the good old days I actually used to collect light gun games, and this is one of the ones I'd go back to time and time again, along with Vampire Knights. Spoiler for when we get to V there. So yeah, it's a light gun game, so there's not really a whole lot you need to know. There's a flimsy story that sees ninjas in a war with demons, as you'd expect, so you set out with your ninja gun to kill all the bad guys. The whole thing is on rails, so you'll go through various feudal Japan looking locations, from towns, forests, caves and so on, fighting the hundreds of monsters that are in the way. At the end of each level you get a boss. Usually these bosses are pretty tough and have a weak spot that you'll need to find. Enemies come in a few flavours, mostly Shogun warrior things, and they look pretty cool. They will have the undead feel to them and take a few hits to put down. Thankfully your gun has unlimited ammo, but does need to be reloaded after every few shots. Normally you do this by shooting outside the screen, but if you're using a controller like I am, you just press triangle. Easy. There aren't any other weapons to collect, but you do have a bit of ninja magic. This kills pretty much everything on the screen, but supplies are very limited of these, as you can imagine. Shooting scenery lets you find hidden power-ups or sometimes extra magic scrolls, but things move pretty fast so you likely won't get them on your first playthrough. But if you're like me and love light gun games, the chances are you'll be coming back to this to play it through time and time again anyway, so you can just get them the next time round. I do like that the enemies have a life bar and not just bosses, and almost all enemy projectiles can be shot out of the air, giving you a proper chance. If you're a scumbag like me and playing this on an emulator, it's still good fun to play, and the crosshair is responsive, but never as fast as you'd quite like. Though it does have a lock-on which really helps as most enemies are pretty fast. I would like to see if I can use a mouse here for light gun games. If anyone knows how to do that, let me know. It all looks good as well. The graphics are pretty much what you'd expect from a game like this, and other than maybe wanting a few more enemy types, there's not really anything to complain about. And really, that's all I need to say about this one. It's a light gun game, so you know exactly what you're getting. It's a really fun one to play. I do recommend playing it properly with a light gun if you can, and I know good old Beltbuckle Bill is in the process of collecting PS1 and 2 light gun games, so add this to your collection for next time I'm round, please. Nitro Bike here is a cool arcade-style racing game from Ubisoft. You can choose from a variety of tood-filled idiots and a selection of nitro bikes, which are basically like regular motorbikes but with a massive turbo boost on the back, kind of like the Batmobile. Then you choose from a bunch of races and events which you have to compete in order to unlock even more events, as well as new characters and bikes to ride. At first I wasn't sure about this one, as it's got strange loose handling and almost feels like one of those comedy physics based games, you know the ones I mean. But after a couple of races and seeing how it all worked, I've got to say I was kinda hooked to it. Your bike can turn on a dime and you have full control even when you're in the air, and this is clearly done on purpose, as you'll be using your nitro a hell of a lot to get some crazy speed almost constantly, and you'll end up doing some massive jumps, so being able to position yourself correctly when you land is very important. There's a few game modes as you play. There's races, which are exactly that, a few laps around various courses. Then you've got lap challenges, where you have to complete one lap of a course in under a certain time. There's elimination mode, where every lap, whoever is in last position is eliminated from the race, and there's also a sort of time trial thing when you're on a timer and have to hit checkpoints in order to have enough time to make it to the end. And finally, there's a championship. Normally, when you've completed all the other events in a cup, you then have to race against all the other racers on the tracks, earning points and eventually a medal. You need a certain amount of points to unlock the upper levels. Gold medals on an event give 3 points, if you get silver you get 2 points, and bronze for 1 point. So you might need to replay some of the events a few times to get the full point quota. Thankfully, you can go back to any event you've unlocked whenever you like. Often this is worth doing with some of the harder levels when you've got a new bike or something like that with better stats, especially the one lap ones. I didn't find the races all that tough, and actually noticed that I was often almost a full half a lap ahead of the computer races at most times, though that did just make me feel like a cool driver man, and I didn't mind. The game looks decent enough, and it has a variety of tracks to race on, and I really like how the view changes slightly when you boost, getting all stretched and blurry. It really helps with the sense of speed, which is already pretty damn good. I'm also a big fan of the presentation here. Might sound a bit daft, but I find a lot of modern racing games very confusing to navigate. Even just getting into a normal race can be a chore, but this is from the time where you just choose your racer and then choose the event that you want to take part in. It's just what it needs to be. I can imagine this would be great fun to play with a friend. I don't play a lot of racing games these days, but when I do, it tends to be against a few mates, and this one would be crazy blast for an evening. If you like racing games, definitely don't overlook it. And finally for today, here's a random one. It's NRA Gun Club. This is clearly a budget game for people that love guns, which, as far as the stereotypes go, is all Americans. Is that right, Toby, Keaton and company? You love guns? It's a simple shooting gallery game that honestly had me playing for way longer than I expected. You choose from a selection of real-life guns, including pistols, rifles, shotguns and even Uzis. Then you choose from a few different game modes, all of which are variations on a shooting gallery, and you have either a certain amount of time or shots to reach a score quota. If you reach the quota, then you'll unlock more guns to use, and it's kind of fun. The galleries are all fine. You've got one that's just plates and bottles, another that is more proper targets. Then there's a skeet shooting mode where you've got to shoot the clay pigeons, and you even have some pretty fun bonus modes, like bowling, where you have 2 shots per turn to knock down 10 cans. There's darts, which give you a ton of options, all of which are normal rules for darts, but you've got to shoot the dartboard instead of throwing a dart. There's even a carnival style game where the ducks and targets are all moving across the screen for you to shoot down. And finally, there's even an action style mode where you have to shoot all the targets in an assault course and move around it. I thought this would play like a proper FPS game, but it doesn't. You're always locked in one position, but when you're done in one area, you press a direction on the D-pad to choose what position you want to move to next. It actually works fine, and I kind of enjoy it. Now, I don't know a lot about guns, but I'm going to assume that as it's a licensed game, that all of these look as accurate as they can for the PS2, and I presume they have the real-life sound effects as well. Actually, shooting the guns, I couldn't tell too much of a difference between most of them. They all seemed to be incredibly accurate, but there were noticeable differences in recoil and things like that. Being a budget title, there isn't much in the way of bells and whistles, and this is really just a high-score game where you want to unlock all the new guns, but it was addictive to play. There's no music at all, which I found kind of strange, but it probably would have been shite anyway, and the game does feel a bit empty because of it, but I just put on some Daft Punk and had a good enough time with it all. The graphics are fine, pretty standard budget affair, and the controls are responsive, and I did find myself taking the time with some of the harder targets, and even going back to the game a few times after recording to have another go. And that's all there is to it. It's a gallery shooting game. It would actually be a pretty good game to get someone who hasn't played a first-person shoot before to learn the basics. And also, those minigames would be great fun against a few friends, and there is a multiplayer option. So yeah, believe it or not, this actually isn't a bad game. It's not going to be for everyone, and it does exactly what it sets out to do, and I think it does it quite well. You don't have to like the NRA, but everyone likes shooting targets, don't they? Give it a go. So there you go, 10 games for the PlayStation 2 that you might not have played that are worth a few minutes of your time. As always, let us know what other games we could have included here, and don't forget to check out my Patreon for even more content. Now all that's left for me to say is thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Finished? Unload! Show clear!